My name is Megan Holloway, and the day I told my parents, "We're tired of you. Get out and don't come back," I watched their faces crumble just like they once shattered my daughter's. Can you imagine saying those words to your own mother and father and meaning them? Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and have you ever had to choose your child over your own family? The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I stepped up onto the porch, the December air biting at my cheeks. I'd barely knocked once when the door swung open. My mother's expression wasn't just cold, it was glacial. "There she is," she said without even a smile. "We're tired of her, take her and don't bring her back." I blinked, certain I had misheard. What do you mean?" Behind her in the entryway stood my daughter Ellie, clutching her little pink backpack like it was armor. Her cheeks were red from crying, her blonde curls tangled and flat against her face. She was only 6. 6. My father's voice joined from somewhere behind them. "She's just too much, Megan, it's been exhausting." "Too much." I stared at them, my parents, Evelyn and Tom Holloway, these same people who once held me through night terrors, taught me to ride a bike, told me that family meant everything. And now this. Ellie's small legs carried her forward, and she wrapped her arms around my waist with a sob. I knelt down and hugged her tightly, one hand stroking the back of her head. "Did she do something wrong?" I asked, my voice hollow, mechanical. "She talks too much, she cries over everything. We can't enjoy our days with her here," my mother replied, as if listing off the weather. "She's a child," I whispered. "She's your child," my father said, sharper now. "Not ours." My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, to rage, but my body chose stillness. A horrible calm spread through me, the kind that only comes when you're 1 second from breaking. I stood up, my hand still protectively on Ellie's shoulder. "You could have called me, you didn't have to wait until I came here just to dump this on her in front of her." "She needed to know," my mother replied coolly. "And maybe you do too. We're not your babysitters, Megan. We didn't sign up to raise another child just because your life got hard." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wanted to yell that I'd never treated them like babysitters. That every drop-off was filled with guilt and careful planning, not entitlement. That I only ever wanted Ellie to know the love of her grandparents. But I said nothing. Instead, I nodded once, barely. Then I turned and walked Ellie to the car. She didn't speak on the drive. Neither did I, her little legs curled up in the passenger seat, her backpack still clutched tightly in her lap. The silence between us wasn't peaceful, it was ringing. My mind spiraled with disbelief, like I was watching the scene unfold from above, detached from my own body. How do you explain to a child that her grandparents have rejected her? How do you explain that they didn't even try to love her the way they'd adored her cousins? Ellie sniffled quietly. I glanced over. "Are you okay, baby?" She nodded, but I knew better. "I love you," I said softly, placing my hand over hers. "And I am so proud of you. None of this is your fault, do you understand?" She looked out the window and nodded again, eyes distant. And me, I just kept driving. Past the frosted pine trees, past the playground she used to beg to stop at on the way home, past the grocery store where I'd once used coupons to stretch every dollar just to make sure we could bring snacks to Grandma and Grandpa's house. I used to think bringing Ellie to them was a gift. I used to think they'd wanted her. But that night, the only thing I could feel was shame. Not for what happened, but for not seeing it sooner. That night, I made mac and cheese for dinner even though Ellie barely touched it. She sat at the kitchen table, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the steam curling off her bowl. The only light in the apartment came from above the stove, a single humming bulb that made everything feel softer, smaller, a little removed from reality. I didn't push her to eat. I didn't say much at all. She'd cried in the car, but now she was quiet in a way I didn't recognize. And that scared me more than any tantrum could have. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and leaned against the counter, watching her. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "Did I do something wrong?" My chest cracked open. "No, baby," I said, walking over slowly. I knelt beside her chair so I could look right into her eyes. "You did nothing wrong, you were just being yourself." She blinked at me. "But Grandma said I asked too many questions. She said I wear people out." Her words came out flat, like she was reciting a fact from school. Not a complaint, not even a cry for reassurance. "What kind of questions?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "Like why Uncle Jeff's dog doesn't wear shoes in the snow, or if Grandma used to be a ballerina 'cause she moves quiet, or why their house smells like pine but they don't have a tree yet." I almost laughed, almost, but something about the way she said it, the quiet confusion, choked the smile before it could land. She told me to go sit alone, Ellie said, her voice smaller now. She said, go read or something, Ellie, just be less. That word, less, it hit me like a slap. She didn't say that, I whispered, half in disbelief. Ellie nodded. She always liked when Carter and Lily came over. My sister Claire's kids. They got cookies and juice and watched TV in the living room. I had to stay in the kitchen. I swallowed hard. Did she ever yell? Ellie nodded slowly, tracing the edge of the table with her finger. When I asked for seconds of pudding, she said, this isn't a buffet. I didn't know what that meant, but Grandpa laughed. A fist closed in my chest. I reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You know what, Elle? She looked at me, eyes wide. None of that was okay, not one bit of it, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. She didn't respond right away, just rested her chin on her knees. Do Carter and Lily get in trouble too? I hesitated. I don't think so. Why not? And there it was. I had no answer that would make sense to a 6-year-old, none that made sense to me either, so I told her the closest thing to the truth I could manage. Sometimes grown-ups get stuck in their own ideas about people, and sometimes those ideas are wrong, she frowned. Like when I thought the moon followed our car. Exactly, I smiled softly, brushing her bangs back. But the moon was just doing what moons do, it didn't mean to be bad. I blinked, stunned, this child. You're not bad, I said firmly. You're kind, you're curious, you're strong. Ellie nodded slowly, but I knew it would take more than words to undo the quiet damage. That night, after she was tucked in bed with her stuffed unicorn and a pile of picture books she didn't open, I sat in the living room with an old photo album on my lap. Christmases, birthdays. That one summer weekend where we picked blueberries and Ellie wore pigtails tied with ribbon. I'd brought her to their house nearly every Saturday for 2 years. Had I missed the signs? Back then, I thought I was giving her something I didn't have as a kid, roots, tradition, security. But looking at those photos now, something gnawed at the edges. In almost every picture, Ellie wasn't centered. She was off to the side, half blocked by furniture or completely absent while Carter and Lily beamed front and center with their matching outfits and chocolate-smeared smiles. I closed the album. On the shelf above me was a spiral notebook I used when I needed to think. I opened it to a fresh page and picked up a pen. My hand hovered for a moment. Then I wrote, maybe I've been a bad mom by trusting the wrong people. The sentence stared back at me. It didn't feel accusatory. It felt true. Not because I hadn't tried, but because I'd believed that family love was a given, that it would naturally extend to my child. That loyalty was inherited, but it wasn't. And it didn't. I glanced around the apartment. The peeling wallpaper, the second-hand bookshelf, the couch with one spring that always poked me in the back. It wasn't glamorous, but suddenly it felt sacred. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. And now, it was up to me to protect the only person in the world who truly depended on me. Ellie, and I would. Ellie fell asleep with the hallway light still on, clutching her unicorn like it was the only steady thing in her world. I watched her chest rise and fall for a long time before closing her door halfway, letting the familiar creak announce its nightly position. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. No TV hum, no phone notifications. Just me and the spiral notebook I'd started writing in again, its corners dog-eared from years of stopping and starting. On the coffee table, the old family photo album still sat unopened since last night. I hadn't meant to go down that road. But after Ellie's question, do Carter and Lily get in trouble too? Something in me needed answers. I sat down slowly, pulling the album into my lap. The cover was cracked vinyl, navy blue with a faded gold trim that looked almost regal if you didn't touch it. I remembered this exact book sitting on the shelf in my parents' hallway for years, always updated with the good pictures, as Mom used to say. The first page was Claire's wedding. 2012. Her dress, cream satin and sleeveless, had been hand-altered by Grandma Evelyn, and everyone had talked about it for months afterward. In the picture, I stood off to the side in a pale blue bridesmaid dress, smiling, though I couldn't remember smiling that day. I was holding Ellie in my arms, 6 months old at the time, swaddled in pink. The next photo was of Claire and our dad mid-dance laughing, then Claire's baby shower, then Carter's first birthday, complete with a petting zoo in the backyard and 2 balloon arches. I remembered baking a sheet cake that morning, and how Mom said, "You didn't have to do that, Meg, but Claire already ordered one." That cake never got cut. Page after page told the same story. Claire's family front and center, glowing and adored, and me somewhere in the margins. Sometimes smiling. Sometimes not even there. I turned to a page labeled Thanksgiving 2019. There was the whole family at the table, turkey gleaming, laughter frozen in midair. Ellie, 4 years old then, was sitting at the kids' table. Alone, Carter and Lily sat next to the adults, wedged between our mother and Aunt Janine. I remembered that moment. Ellie had spilled juice and cried when my mother snapped at her to stop acting ridiculous. I'd taken her outside to calm down, and when we came back, her seat had been cleared. She ate cold stuffing on the floor beside me while Claire's kids got extra pie. Back then, I told myself it was just a long day. Too many people. Everyone was stressed. Now I saw it for what it was. I flipped forward to Christmas, photos of matching pajamas for the cousins, none for Ellie. Carter opening a bicycle, Lily unwrapping an art set, Ellie holding a $10 puzzle from the drugstore. I had bought her the dollhouse she'd been begging for and brought it over the next morning, but they didn't even let her open it at their house. Too big, my mother had said, not making eye contact. I used to think I was imagining things. That maybe I was being sensitive. That maybe I was the reason they kept their distance. But the photos never lied. They had always treated Ellie like an obligation, like she was evidence of some mistake I'd made that they didn't want to look at too closely. I closed the album. Back in the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and stared at the sticky note on the fridge. Grocery list. Library returns. Remember Ellie's raincoat? I should have seen this sooner. Not just the rejection, but the pattern. My whole life I had been useful, not cherished. In high school, I was the one who cleaned up after Claire's birthday parties. The one who sat in the ER with Dad when he threw out his back while Claire was too busy with auditions. The one who took my own sick days to help Mom when she had her surgery. And when I had Ellie at 28 after a failed engagement and a year-long stretch of unemployment, my parents were disappointed but supportive. Or so they said. What they really were was ashamed. Not of Ellie, of me, they just took it out on her. I walked back to the living room and opened my notebook again. This time the pen didn't hesitate. I thought I was giving her family, but I was feeding her to wolves dressed as grandparents. I wrote it slowly. Each letter felt heavier than the last. Below it I wrote, they always praised Claire, even when I did more. They never asked Ellie what she liked, just told her to be quieter. They call once a week, but only to ask about money or favors. They've never babysat without complaining. They never remember her birthday without a reminder. Then, at the bottom, if love has to be earned, it's not love. The words sat there, stark against the lined page. I was done making excuses for them. That night, as I turned off the light and crawled into bed beside my sleeping daughter, I made a promise I didn't say out loud, but one I felt deep in my bones. Ellie would never again feel second in a room where I was standing. The next morning, sunlight slipped across my bedroom wall in thin gold lines, the way it always did, but somehow it felt different. Maybe because I'd barely slept. Maybe because my world had shifted so violently the day before that even the sun seemed unsure of its place. Ellie padded into the room around 7, hair messy, pajamas wrinkled, clutching her unicorn by one ear. She crawled into bed beside me and tucked herself under my arm like she always did on mornings after a nightmare. Except this nightmare was real. "Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's today?" she murmured. My stomach tightened. "No, sweetheart, not today." She nodded, almost relieved, and rested her head on my shoulder. A few minutes later, as she moved to get dressed, I reached for my phone with a determination that felt unfamiliar, steely, clear, almost foreign to the woman who spent years smoothing over my parents' edges. I opened the browser and typed, "Therapists near me who see adults and children." The name that caught my eye first was Dr. Lisa Niles, Ph.D., Family Trauma and Parent Support. Her profile photo showed a woman in her 50s with warm brown eyes and soft curls framing a kind smile. Nothing forced, nothing clinical, just an open face. I called before I had time to second-guess myself. "Dr. Niles' office, this is Marcy," chirped a friendly voice. My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Hi, I'd like to schedule an appointment for myself first, and then for my daughter if possible." "What's going on today?" she asked gently. It was such a simple question, but something in her tone, the absence of judgment, disarmed me completely. "My parents," I swallowed hard. They said awful things to her, told me not to bring her back, and I don't know how to help her or myself. She didn't rush me, she didn't tell me other people had it worse, she just listened. We can absolutely support you, she said. Dr. Niles has an opening this morning at 11. Can you make that? I almost cried with relief. Yes, yes, we'll be there. We drove across town in silence, but a calmer silence this time, like the air had loosened around us. Ellie sat in the back humming a tune she'd made up herself, the unicorn still tucked under her arm. Dr. Niles' office was inside a brick building with ivy climbing the corners. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lavender and old books. There were framed watercolor paintings on the walls, soft blues and greens, gentle landscapes without sharp edges. A woman stepped into the waiting area wearing a long cardigan and a warm expression. Megan, and this must be Ellie. Ellie pressed closer to me but nodded. Dr. Niles crouched slightly to match her height, not pushing, not crowding, just becoming smaller so Ellie didn't feel so alone. That unicorn looks very brave, she said softly. Does she have a name? Ellie whispered. Starshine. Well, Starshine is welcome here any time. My daughter's grip loosened by a fraction. Dr. Niles motioned toward her office. Megan, why don't we talk first, and Ellie can wait with our play specialist in the next room. Ellie looked at me, checking for danger, and I kissed her forehead. I'll be right here, okay? She nodded and followed a young woman holding a tray of crayons and stickers. For the first time since yesterday, she didn't look afraid. Inside the office, sunlight spilled across a thick rug and shelves lined with books on healing, boundaries, childhood development. A box of tissues rested on the coffee table, an invitation, not a threat. So, Dr. Niles said softly as we sat down. Tell me what happened. I tried to start calmly. I really did, but the words came out fractured, trembling. The moment I described Ellie standing on that porch with her pink backpack, my voice cracked, and I kept going, her tears, my parents' words, the years of subtle favoritism I'd ignored, the photo album, the journal entry that still burned in my head. Somewhere between explaining the juice incident and the birthday puzzle, I stopped being able to talk. Not from shame, just from sheer exhaustion. Dr. Niles leaned forward slightly, her voice warm but steady. Megan, what happened to Ellie isn't new. It's a rupture in a pattern that has been building for years, and you're finally seeing it clearly. My throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't pain, it was recognition. You're not a bad mother, she continued. You're a mother who trusted your parents to love your child the way they loved your sisters. And now that you see the truth, you're protecting her. That's what good mothers do. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to hold myself together. But a sob broke free anyway, one of those deep, unpretty sounds that comes from the place where you hide the parts of yourself you don't let anyone see. She didn't flinch. She handed me a tissue. You are not alone in this, she said. And you're already doing the hardest part. You walked away. When the session ended, something inside me had shifted. A small, barely there thing, but enough. A place where guilt used to live was now something like resolve. As we drove home, Ellie looked up at me from the back seat. Mommy. Yeah, baby. Are we okay now? I smiled, genuine this time. We're getting there. And for the first time since yesterday, maybe longer, I believed it. James got home from work around 6. The winter wind chased him through the door, his cheeks flushed, arms full of takeout containers that made the whole apartment smell like soy sauce and sesame oil. He grinned when he saw us, Ellie in her pajamas on the couch, me cross-legged beside her, helping her glue sequins onto construction paper. But the grin didn't last. His eyes lingered on me, studying my face the way he always did when he knew something had happened, something I hadn't said yet. I waited until Ellie was tucked in, her glittery masterpiece drying on the coffee table, before I sat across from him at the kitchen table. I went to my parents today, I said quietly. James froze, chopsticks halfway to his mouth. To pick up Ellie, I nodded once. That was the plan. And then I told him everything. I didn't soften it, didn't edit it. I told him the words they used. We're tired of her. Don't bring her back. I told him how Ellie cried, how they treated her differently than Claire's kids, how they never even tried to hide it. By the time I finished, James had set down his food untouched. He leaned back in his chair, jaw tight, brows drawn low. They said that. About our daughter, I nodded. Right in front of her. He swore under his breath, then pushed his chair back and paced a few slow steps across the kitchen. I could see the fury curling through him, not loud or dramatic, just dense and quiet and unforgiving. I knew they were cold, he muttered, voice tight. I didn't know they were cruel. He turned to face me. Megan, we've been sending them money every month. $600. Since what, 2020? Yeah, I whispered. Since my dad lost that second job. 4 years, he said. That's almost 30 grand. He didn't have to say what we were both thinking. We'd been funding people who couldn't even show basic decency to a 6-year-old. James walked over to the small desk in the corner and opened the laptop. What are you doing? I asked. Logging into the bank. I'm canceling the transfer. I blinked. Just like that. He looked at me calm and final. They don't get to mistreat our daughter and collect rent for it. I opened my mouth to respond, maybe to protest, maybe to play peacemaker out of habit, but nothing came out, because he was right. They didn't deserve our help, not anymore. I watched his fingers type, each keystroke like a nail in the coffin of whatever illusion I'd been clinging to about loyalty and obligation. And when he clicked cancel, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clean. He turned back toward me. You okay? I nodded, eyes damp but clear. It just feels like I've been feeding a monster I didn't want to admit was real. James walked over, pulled me into his arms. You're not the same woman who excused their behavior last year. I rested my cheek against his chest, breathing in the faint scent of takeout and winter air. I don't want to be. Well, he said, brushing a hand through my hair, you're not. That night, we didn't talk about reconciliation, or forgiveness, or any of the words people like to use to paint over abuse with polite vocabulary. We talked about Ellie, about how we'd show her love could be loud and obvious and safe, about dance classes she wanted to try, about maybe taking a small trip somewhere snowy in January, just the three of us. And we talked about how money, like love, was a gift, not a duty. I didn't know what my parents would say when they noticed the canceled transfer. But for once, I didn't care. They could miss the money. They already missed the chance to know their granddaughter. Dr. Niles wore a deep green cardigan this time, the same soft smile on her face as she welcomed me into her office. The air inside felt warmer than last week, maybe because I'd already cried here once, or maybe because I knew I didn't have to explain myself from scratch. Today, Ellie was in the next room coloring again, Starshin the unicorn propped beside her. It was strange how fast she'd taken to the space, how quickly her shoulders settled the moment we walked through the door. Maybe because she sensed it too, this was a place where no one would ask her to be less. I sat on the couch and held my coffee between both hands, waiting for the words to come. Megan, Dr. Niles began gently, I know last week was heavy, but sometimes what happens in the present wakes up something deeper. Tell me about your family, before Ellie. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I was the helper, I said, almost automatically. That was my role, she nodded. Helper how? My mom used to say I was her little partner. I did the dishes, folded the laundry, cleaned up after Claire's messes even though she was older. I paused, then shook my head. No, not even older, just louder. She tilted her head. You mean Claire got more attention? She took more. She cried louder, argued harder, threw bigger tantrums. And it worked. She got what she wanted and I got praised for being easy. I tried to smile, but it didn't quite land. It was like my gold star was disappearing quietly. I looked down at my coffee. I thought if I made myself useful they'd see me, but the only time I got attention was when I was fixing something or apologizing for someone else. Dr. Niles nodded slowly. And how did that feel as a child? I hesitated. Normal. But now. Now I look back and realize I was always shrinking, trying not to take up too much room. Even at Christmas, I used to wrap Claire's gifts from all of us because she didn't want to. My mom called me thoughtful. But really, I was just trying to keep the peace. I paused. You know the worst part, I carried that into adulthood like it was a skill. Dr. Niles smiled kindly. It is a skill. It's just when you don't need to survive anymore. The words struck deeper than I expected. You've built your life on being accommodating, she continued, but that survival strategy came with a cost. Now you're seeing how it affects not just you but Ellie. I nodded slowly. She's not like me, she asks questions, she wants to be seen. And I think I let her walk into the same fire I spent my childhood learning to avoid. But you pulled her out, Dr. Niles said gently. Already doing what your younger self never had. A mother who's willing to burn the blueprint and draw a new one. My eyes welled up, but I didn't cry. Not this time, because she was right. I'd made the mistake of assuming that being the good daughter meant being the invisible one. That if I could just endure quietly, eventually I'd be rewarded with belonging. But Ellie was teaching me something I never learned back then. You don't have to earn love by disappearing. You just have to refuse to disappear. I want to teach her that, I whispered, that she doesn't have to be palatable to be worthy. She's already learning, Dr. Niles said, because she has you. When our session ended, I found Ellie kneeling beside a play table, pressing star-shaped stickers onto a drawing of 3 people, me, her, and Starshine. We're standing on a hill, she said proudly. What's behind us? I asked, pointing to a dark blob near the bottom. She shrugged. Just the old house. I didn't want it to look real, so I colored over it. I kissed the top of her head, swallowing the lump in my throat. Me too, baby, me too. It started with a text. Claire, hey, can we talk about Mom and Dad and Ellie? I stared at my phone for a full minute, unsure if I was reading it right. Claire never texted like that. She was all casual emojis and OMG remind me kind of energy. But this felt different. I waited another minute before replying, me, sure, when? Claire, now if you're free, I'm parked in your lot, the kids are with Matt. I looked out the window, and there she was sitting in her silver SUV, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like she didn't know what to do with them. I opened the door and stepped into the cold. When I climbed into the passenger seat, the air between us was quiet. Heavy. Claire looked like she hadn't slept much. Hair up in a messy bun, no earrings, just tired eyes that finally seemed to be looking at me like a person instead of a background character in her spotlight. I should have come sooner, she said quietly. I stayed silent. She looked down at her coffee. I heard what happened with Ellie, that word again, heard. I wasn't sure if it was true, she admitted. Mom told me you overreacted. I almost laughed. Of course she did. I didn't believe her, Claire said quickly. I mean, not fully. But then I talked to Carter. He said Ellie wasn't allowed in the living room last time you dropped her off, that she had to stay in the den by herself. I nodded. That wasn't the first time. Claire's face twisted. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her, really looked. Would you have listened? She blinked. I don't know. Exactly. I hadn't meant for it to sound bitter. But it did, because I was bitter for years. Not just about the way Mom and Dad treated Ellie, but about the way Claire had floated above it all, untouched, unbothered, always assuming things were fine because they were fine for her. I thought I was giving Ellie a family, I said quietly. But she's always been second to your kids. Always, and I told myself it was just old habits. That maybe they were tired or distracted, but now I see it clearly. Claire didn't argue. She didn't rush to defend them. She didn't pivot to excuses. She just sat there and nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I never noticed, she whispered. But now that I'm thinking about it, it's true. Ellie was always off to the side. And you, God, Megan, you were always the one setting up chairs, making the desserts, babysitting while I caught up with everyone. My throat tightened. Claire reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote down what Carter said. I wanted you to know I'm paying attention now. I didn't before, but I am now. I looked at the paper, still folded. I didn't open it, but I nodded. That day, Claire continued, voice shaking, when you texted me and said they told you not to bring Ellie back, I felt something crack. I thought, what if they said that about Carter or Lily? What if Mom looked at them like they were a burden? Her eyes met mine. I would burn the world down. I swallowed hard. You don't have to forgive them, she added. But if you want me to talk to them, to say it out loud, I will. I nodded slowly, not ready to hand her a medal, but grateful nonetheless. Because someone in the family finally saw it. Not just what they did to Ellie, but what they'd always done to me. I don't want to fix it, I said. I just want to stop pretending it's not broken. Claire reached over and took my hand. I can do that. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, the heater humming softly between us. Then she smiled, small, sad, but honest. Want to come over this weekend? No parents, no drama, just wine, bad takeout, and the kids running around. I thought about it, about boundaries, about the notebook in my drawer, the one I'd started calling my lines in the sand. Then I smiled back. Only if we let the kids destroy your living room. Claire laughed. Deal. It started with a text. A short one from my mother 2 days after I'd seen Claire. Mom, maybe we overreacted. You know how kids can be. No hello. No how are you. Just a half apology wrapped in a shrug. Like what they said to Ellie was a mild oops, not a rejection that made my daughter cry herself to sleep. I didn't respond. The next morning my voicemail lit up. Dad's voice. Meg, your mom's upset. We were tired that day. You took it all too personally. This doesn't have to become a thing. Don't make this bigger than it is. There it was. The family classic. You're making this a thing. It was like muscle memory. Every time they hurt someone, the story flipped before you could finish blinking. Suddenly you were too sensitive, too emotional, too unforgiving. I played the message twice just to be sure I heard it right. He really said it. Don't make this bigger than it is. As if telling your daughter she's not welcome because your granddaughter is too much was just a bad mood. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in my lap, heart pounding, not because I believed them, not anymore, but because I knew what came next. I'd seen the script play out my whole life. Step 1, hurt you. Step 2, minimize it. Step 3, guilt you into silence. Step 4, repeat. I opened my notes app and typed it out. It helped sometimes to write things down before they twisted in my brain. Don't make this bigger than it is. Translation, we'd rather ignore this than change. You took it too personally. Translation, our comfort matters more than your truth. I didn't send a reply. I didn't call back. I didn't explain, justify, or beg them to see what they'd done. Because I was done. But that didn't stop the pressure from building. 2 days later, Claire texted me. Mom asked if I'd pass along a message. She says she's worried about your tone. My tone, not my daughter's tears, not the years of being sidelined, not the rejection of a child, but my tone. I told her to leave me out of it, Claire added. Just wanted you to know. I thanked her. And then I sat there, staring at the wall, trying to breathe through the rising tension in my chest. They wanted me to come crawling back, to second-guess myself, to doubt my own memory again. But something had changed. This time, I wasn't alone. Ellie was in the next room humming to herself as she built a tower out of plastic cups. James had just left for work, still muttering under his breath about cutting them off years too late. Claire had taken my side, without excuses, and I had Dr. Niles' voice still in my head from our last session. You're not responsible for their discomfort. Only for your child's safety and your own. I opened my journal and wrote, this guilt doesn't belong to me. They could try to hand it off like a hot potato, but I wasn't catching it anymore. Later that night, I tucked Ellie into bed and brushed a curl off her forehead. Her eyes were already drifting closed. Mommy, yeah, baby, are they still mad? I paused. Maybe, I said gently, but that's not our problem. She nodded once and turned to her side. And just like that, she let it go. I wished I could do the same, but I was learning. And this time, I wasn't shrinking. Claire showed up on a Thursday with a bottle of cheap red wine and both her kids in tow. No warning, no fanfare, just a knock at the door, followed by her sheepish grin when I opened it. Got room for a little chaos? She asked. I looked past her at Carter and Lily, already kicking off their sneakers in the hallway, Ellie squealing somewhere behind me as she ran to greet them. The apartment filled with the sound of backpacks dropping, giggles, and someone shouting, I get the blue blanket. Chaos, yes, but it was the kind that didn't break things, it just lived a little louder. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Claire followed me into the kitchen, pulled 2 mismatched wine glasses from the cabinet like she'd been doing it her whole life. In truth, she hadn't. This closeness was still new, still tentative. Like we were both testing the floorboards of a bridge we hadn't dared walk across before. We clinked glasses and sipped, leaning against opposite sides of the counter while the kids built a blanket fort in the living room. For a while, we just listened. Carter's deep voice directing construction, Ellie's laughter, Lily asking, can unicorns be allowed inside? Then Claire set her glass down. I've been thinking about that day you came to get Ellie, she said, eyes on the countertop. And about all the times before that. I didn't say anything, I just let her go. I used to tell myself Mom and Dad were just tired too, she said. That they were old school, set in their ways, but really I think I knew, I just didn't want to know. I looked at her carefully. What made you change your mind? She took a breath. It was something Carter said, last Christmas. He told me. Ellie looked sad when she opened her present. I asked why and he said, because she always gets the boring ones. My stomach turned, Claire kept going. I brushed it off at the time, I said that's just how Grandma shops. But later that night I couldn't stop thinking about it. How Carter noticed, how he could see it and I hadn't. I said nothing. Not because I didn't have feelings, believe me, I did, but because I knew this was hard for her, to say out loud, to sit in. I used to feel special, she admitted, laughing bitterly. Like maybe I deserved their praise. Maybe I earned their extra effort. But now, I look back and I realize they only knew how to love one version of a daughter, the shiny one, the easy one. I blinked, caught off guard by the honesty. She looked up at me. I'm sorry. It landed heavier than I expected. Not because it fixed anything. not because it undid the years, but because, for once, she wasn't defending them. She wasn't protecting the illusion. She was finally on the outside of it, too. I thought if I worked hard enough they'd see me, I said quietly. Turns out they just liked who they could control. Claire nodded. I think they needed us to stay in our lanes. I was the golden child. You were the reliable one. And as long as we played our parts, they didn't have to change. We sat in that silence, both of us holding something old and heavy that didn't have a name. The kids burst into laughter from the living room, the sound pulling us back. Claire smiled. They're good together. They are. She looked at me, eyes softening. I want to be better. I want to show up for you, for Ellie, and not just with wine or babysitting or dramatic parking lot speeches. I smiled. You already are. She raised her glass. To sisters getting it wrong for decades and finally starting to get it right. We clinked again. And this time, it felt like a beginning. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. Ellie was napping on the couch, one leg dangling off the cushion, Starshin tucked tightly under her arm. I was halfway through folding laundry when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I peeked through the peephole, my breath caught. There they were, my parents. Both dressed neatly like they were headed to brunch. My mother in her pearl earrings, holding a bag of something cookies, I later realized. My father stood stiff beside her, hands in his coat pockets, a tight smile already forming. I opened the door only halfway. No invitation. Hi, Megan, Mom said brightly, like the last month hadn't happened, like she hadn't told me my daughter was unwelcome. We were in the neighborhood. Of course you were, she held up the bag. I brought those lemon shortbread cookies Ellie likes. Thought we'd drop them off and maybe talk a little, Dad chimed in. We don't want to fight, we just think enough time has passed. Let's move forward. There it was again, the reset button. Like the hurt could be cleared if we just pretended hard enough. Like love was lemon-flavored and crumbly and came in zip-top bags. I didn't move. Ellie stirred behind me on the couch, shifting in her sleep. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me gently, leaving it closed between her and them. I'm not letting you in, I said, voice calm but flat. Mom blinked. Why not? You know why, Dad sighed. Meg, you're dragging this out. It was a rough day. Everyone says things they don't mean. You meant it, I snapped. You looked at my daughter and told me not to bring her back. That's not a slip of the tongue, that's a belief. They stared at me like I'd grown horns, like my refusal to pretend made me the difficult one. She's just energetic, Mom muttered. You always overinterpret. She's a child, I said, my voice breaking a little. And you made her feel unwanted. My father shifted his stance. You don't get to punish us forever. I met his eyes. I'm not punishing you, I'm protecting her. There was a silence, long and cold. Look, Mom said, softening her tone, we brought cookies, we're trying. No, I said, backing toward the door. You're trying to erase, not repair, there's a difference. Dad opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. If you ever want to be part of Ellie's life again, you'll need to take real responsibility, not play nice, not bring baked goods, real accountability. Until then, this door stays closed. I turned, opened the door just enough to slip back inside, and closed it behind me without looking back. Ellie was still asleep on the couch. She never heard the doorbell. She never saw the cookies, and I was glad. The letter came in the mail first, one of those sad little white envelopes with the return address of a law office in town. I didn't even have to open it to guess. Foreclosure notice. 3 months behind, the envelope said, final opportunity to arrange payment. Default pending. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just stared at the paper and felt something quiet click into place. They had always been so proud of their home. The white shutters, the backyard patio, the geraniums Mom repotted every spring. For years, I had helped keep it standing, quiet transfers from James' paycheck, birthday money we didn't need, gas cards tucked into Christmas envelopes. But when I stopped, it all unraveled. A week later, they showed up again. No cookies this time. No pearls. Just weary faces, mismatched coats, and eyes that had finally learned how to look down. I opened the door because I knew this moment was coming. I had dreamed about it, rehearsed it in my mind. But nothing prepares you for the reality of watching your parents stand on your doorstep broken. My mother's voice cracked before she even began. We lost the house, Megan. I nodded once. We didn't know where else to go, my father added. Your family. That word. It tasted different now. Ellie stood beside me in her fuzzy socks, holding Starshin close to her chest. She looked up at me, not scared, just waiting, like she already knew I'd protect her. I turned to my parents, the wind sharp behind them, my voice even. "We're tired of you," I said. Their eyes widened, stunned. I stepped forward, Ellie still at my side. "Those were your words, remember?" I continued. "We're tired of her, take her and don't bring her back." "You said that about my daughter." My mother's lip trembled. "We didn't mean it." "Yes, you did," I said. "And now you want grace without truth, help without apology." My father tried again. "We're not asking for much, just somewhere to stay, until we figure it out." I took a slow breath. "You figured out how to cut my child out of your life in a single sentence," I said. "You can figure this out too." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just closed the door, slowly, deliberately. Their footsteps didn't leave right away. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, Ellie's small fingers laced with mine. "Mommy," she whispered. "Are we still okay?" I bent down to her level, brushing the hair from her eyes. "We're more than okay," I said. "We're safe." And as we walked back to the kitchen hand in hand, I felt it for the first time, not the absence of guilt, but the presence of peace. The apartment feels different now. Not bigger, not fancier. But lighter, like something invisible and heavy finally got dragged out the door and left on the curb. It's in the way Ellie hums to herself while brushing her teeth. The way we dance while making pancakes on Sundays. The way I find glitter on the couch and don't sigh anymore, I just smile. Peace doesn't come all at once. It arrives in soft, steady pieces. Like Tuesday afternoons in Dr. Niles' waiting room, where Ellie now skips into her sessions without clinging to my leg. She always comes out with drawings. Lately, they're full of bright colors and smiling stick figures that don't stand on opposite sides of the page anymore. And my own sessions, they're different now too. I'm not unraveling in every one. Sometimes we just talk about boundaries, about what I want from the next year, about the fact that I signed up for a community writing group because, as Dr. Niles put it, you've told everyone else's story long enough. Time to tell your own. I even wrote a short piece called The Girl Who Didn't Shrink. Ellie helped me decorate the cover with stickers. Claire visits once a week now. No guilt. No weird loyalty dance. Just her, her kids, and too much pizza. The kids build forts, we drink bad wine, and for the first time in our lives we talk like equals. She doesn't dodge hard topics anymore, and I don't pretend I'm okay when I'm not. James, he's different too. He hugs me longer. He says I'm proud of you without needing a reason. And sometimes, when I least expect it, I catch him looking at me like I'm not just Ellie's mom, but a woman who rebuilt her own heart from the inside out. "I like us better now," he said last week while we were doing dishes. I did too. One night as I tucked Ellie in, she looked up from her pillow and asked, "Are Grandma and Grandpa still mad?" I shook my head. "I don't know," she thought for a moment. "Are we mad?" "No," I said. "We're just done letting people hurt us and then pretend it didn't happen." She blinked slowly. "That's like when Carter spilled my juice and blamed me, but Aunt Claire made him say sorry." "Exactly," I said, kissing her forehead. She yawned. "I like our house better now, it's quieter but not the bad kind." I smiled. "Me too, baby. Me too." That night as she slept, I sat by the window and opened my journal. I didn't write about my parents. I didn't write about pain. I wrote about Ellie's laugh. About the sun hitting our couch just right. About healing that shows up in ordinary days. Coffee brewing, cartoons playing, no apologies needed. A year later, I was sitting in a tiny folding chair meant for a kindergartner, surrounded by glue sticks, handprint turkeys, and children proudly dragging their parents toward bulletin boards covered in construction paper masterpieces. It was Hero Week at Ellie's school. The final project was displayed across one bright yellow wall titled, "My Hero Is." Some kids drew firefighters. Some picked cartoon characters. One little boy drew his dad holding a giant cheeseburger, which, to be honest, was pretty impressive. And then I saw Ellie's. Crayon drawings, bold and messy, exactly her style. There was a red dragon with angry eyes, labeled in shaky block letters. Pain. Beside it, a woman with curly brown hair, arms outstretched, standing between the dragon and a little girl in a pink dress holding a unicorn. At the bottom she had written, "And why Mom, she keeps the fire away." I stood there, hand over my mouth, blinking too fast. I didn't expect to cry in a classroom that smelled like applesauce and dry erase markers, but there I was, not broken, just full. Ellie ran over, beaming. "Do you like it?" I crouched beside her and kissed her cheek. "I love it." She pointed to the dragon. "That was the stuff we don't do anymore, like sad talks and yelling." I nodded. "You're right, we don't do that anymore." She leaned in closer. You don't let the fire in, that's why you're my hero. And just like that, every sleepless night, every therapy session, every moment I stood in the hallway wondering if I was doing the right thing, it all folded into this one moment. A child who knew she was safe. A daughter who could name her strength by naming mine. On the walk home, Ellie skipped ahead, spinning in little circles as she walked. I carried her project in my hands, careful not to bend it. When we got back, I tacked it up on our fridge, right next to a grocery list and a magnet that said, "You are enough." Because now I finally believed that. There's no revenge sweeter than raising your child with love they never have to question. If you've ever broken a generational cycle, even when it hurt, even when you were scared, drop in the comments. And if this story moved you, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. Thank you for walking this journey with me. My name is Megan Hartley, and I chose peace over pleasing, and I'll never regret it.